Hello, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Adam Cole with Grant Park Academy of the Arts and TruerMU, and I'm delighted today to have a guest with us that I can't wait to introduce you to. But before I do, I want to say thank you to the folks we always say thank you to. First, we want to say thank you to brassandwinds.com, a Quinn the Eskimo company. When we need help with our brass or woodwind instruments, we always turn to brassandwinds.com. We so appreciate their courtesy and their help and their support. We are Grant Park Academy of the Arts, www.grantparkarts.com. Come learn with us. We teach online and in person. We are currently teaching brass and woodwinds, violin and voice and piano, and we're looking forward to meeting you. Now I'd like to introduce you to a friend of mine who is a horn player with the Milwaukee Symphony. Darcy, welcome to our show.
Thank you. It's really a pleasure to be here.
It's my pleasure to have you. So I want to talk about a lot of things around the horn, but I want to acknowledge that there may be people who are watching this video who, you know, I'm a composer, you're a horn player. The horn is big in our brains, but for a lot of people, they may know there is such a thing as an orchestra, and that may be all they know. So how can we connect them quickly to what the horn is so they can go, oh, a horn, I know what that is.
So you may have seen the horn on lots of holiday cards. It's the one that is very loopy and it has a little bell at the end. Very festive. You may also know the horn is commonly known as the French horn, even though it's actually really German. Well, the English horn is really French, but we don't need to go down that road right now. It's a little too complicated.
We'll take 15 minutes to talk about that later.
Right. No, so the horn, you have heard the horn. Every action movie or Star Wars movie that you've ever gone to, Jurassic Park, Star Wars, Marvel, all of those are going to have lots and lots of horns. The horn has the theme in Star Wars. It has lots of the themes in Superman. John Williams, the film score composer, was very kind to us. So there's a lot of really, really great moments in film music, so that's probably another place where people are going to know the horn.
By the theme, you mean the main melody, the thing.
The main melody, yes.
Da,
Yes.
da, 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 that's the horn?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. Yes, that is the horn. Yeah. Actually, let me play that for you real quick. I'll just grab my horn here and play
Hold it up. Let's
you.
see it. You want to show it to us real quick?
Yeah. So here's the horn. It is between 12 and 14 feet long if you were to stretch it all out, which of course we don't want to do. Yeah, so it's actually really neat. And interestingly, this is the horn mouthpiece. It is the smallest mouthpiece in the brass family, when in fact, the trumpet is actually the smallest brass instrument, but they have a bigger mouthpiece. So it's a little bit weird, right? So this requires good embouchure, which is a word that the root of that is bouche in French, that means mouth. So it's just basically the way that the mouth muscles are structured. And so what I have to do is I have to make sure that my embouchure is really, really good. And I have to make sure that I'm getting that arranged in this tiny, tiny mouthpiece. I put my hand in the bell. I don't know if you can see that. I do put my hand in the bell, and that's for two reasons. Number one, to support the horn, and also it can actually change the sound, and I can get into that a little bit later. Yes. But it does change the sound a little bit. So here's a little bit of Star Wars. I know you're going to recognize this. So that's a very common theme that everybody knows. There's also the Harry Potter, from the Harry Potter movies. The Quidditch music is very much horn. So that's very much, that theme is all the horns. It's really, really fun to play. So yeah, we are the film score heroes.
Okay, that's great. I think that should help some folks figure out if they don't recognize
Absolutely.
the sound. Yeah.
Sure.
So full disclosure for the audience, I once had one of the greatest hours of my life taking a horn lesson with you a couple of years ago. It was absolutely great. I had no experience with it at all. And the thing I came away with that was the biggest surprise to me was how much was right here and how little was in all of that brass tubing. Can you speak to that?
That's absolutely true. I can actually show you something really cool about that. It's here and hear, because you have to be able to hear what you are wanting to play, because I'll show you. This is a trick I call look ma, no valves, okay? I've got this here, no fingers at all, and I do all of this with just the speed of my air and the shape of my lips, okay? So. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Crazy. It's all, and your listeners can try this. If you loosen your lips like a horse and go, that's what essentially, you know, a little bit more refined, not much more refined, what we do for the low range on the horn. And then if you wanted to put your lips together really tight and blow raspberries, that kind of buzz is what we do for the high range. And so it's very much there. Now, because it's all here in your lips, the changing of the notes, the valves aren't going to help you very much with accuracy. So you have to have a really good ear, and you have to be able to be focused enough so that you're really tuning into that ear. I tell my students, it's like zooming your focus in on your pitch memory. So that way, like if I'm going for like a third space C in the treble staff, which for the horn, that's going to sound a fifth lower, because the horn is, we live in hornland F, which is a fifth lower than concert pitch instruments like the flute or the oboe, right?
Let me translate that for the ordinary person real quick.
Yes.
So what you're saying is that if you're looking at a piece of paper with your music on it, even like if I was a piano player and I looked over your shoulder, I'd play the piano and I'd play it right here on the piano, and
right.
You would play it, but when you played it, it would sound lower because it's it's going to come out differently on your end.
Exactly. So the notes of the horn are pitched a fifth lower. They sound a fifth lower than printed. So yes, that's true. So if you played a middle C on the piano, it would just sound like a middle C. If I played my middle C on the piano, it would sound like the F below that middle C. The English horn, actually, the lower, one of the lower winds in the woodwind family, they are also in the same key that we are, which is kind of neat. So we're the only two instruments on the stage that are in F, which is odd. Except occasionally there's an F tuba, but that's very rare. So,
so this thing about being an F, the way you're describing it, you're making it sound somewhat significant. Is it just kind of fun to be an F, or is there something really important about that?
So interestingly, the horn started out as without any valves at all. In fact, I actually have a natural horn. I don't know if I've shown that to you. There's a YouTube video actually that I can point you to with me explaining the differences between the natural horn and the regular horn. So you can link that to that in the comments if you want. But
valves are the buttons. Let's be sure we.
The valves are the buttons and also the tubes. So the buttons actually I'll show you here. So the valves. Let me know if you need me to change the angle. The valves just change these little. They turn these little like cylinders, and in the cylinder there's a hole. So the hole reroutes the air. So if I push down this key, it routes the air into this tube. So it makes it that much longer, right? If I push down the trigger and this one, it goes into the lower tube, right? So with no trigger, I'm just in the top layer of tubes. With the trigger, I'm in the bottom, the lower layer of tubes.
And the more tube, the more brass that air has to go through, the lower the sound. Is that right?
Yes, exactly. The lower the fundamental.
Right.
So, yeah, exactly. So yes, generally.
So you could make it higher, but you'd be starting at a lower place.
Exactly.
Okay.
True.
All right,
yeah.
Good. And so thank you for explaining that. I just want to make sure everybody's with us.
Sure.
You were going to say something about F and how there didn't used to be any buttons. If I'm going to use the ordinary person's term,
yes.
There didn't used to be any buttons on that horn, and you just had to do it all with your mouth, right?
Yes, you had to do it all with your mouth. And then composers wanted to be able to compose in different keys, right? And so what the horn player would do in order to change the length of the tube of the horn, and they would just take a slide, right? It would kind of look like one of these slides. These slides come out, right? So they would take a different crook and stick it in and then be like, boom, then the horn is in horn land of E flat. That's the main, like if you played a C, it would sound like if you play your middle C, it would be an E flat, right?
Kind of like one of those electronic keyboards where you can push the button and then what used to be C is now going to come out of D.
That is exactly right.
Okay.
Yes, exactly right. So it's basically like, and now that we live in the key of F, we have all of the crooks, basically all of those crooks that they used to use are all just already built in, and we don't have to yank them out and put another one in. We just push down the keys and then we can automatically very quickly change the length of our tubing. And it's really, really nice that way. So
why F though? Why not just move you up to C?
That's a really great question. And I think the reason for that is just for some reason that seemed to be the best pitch to center the horn around. It seemed to be one of the easiest overtone series to base ourselves in. It seemed to be a really good middle ground. Mm-hmm. And then also a good starting place to add back in all the other keys. So now when we think about, now we have to transpose, because a lot of the older music written for the horn, like by Brahms and Beethoven and Haydn and all kinds of other people, other composers, they require us to transpose because they just thought, oh, we'll just stick a crook in there. Well, now it requires sort of the part of your brain that's really good at crossword puzzles and like logic, puzzles. So what you do is you look at the note, and in order to know what the distance is that you're going to be transposing up or down, right, from the note, you have to say, okay, I live in the land of Hornland. That is an F, right? So I start an F. Now, if I'm going to be transposing to E flat, I am traveling from the land of F to E flat. So what is the distance? You can look at this on a piano. What's the distance between F and E flat? That's a whole step down. So that's how I know. So now, sometimes, let's say I always live in the hornland key of F, and then I need to travel to B flat. Now there's two different kinds of B flats, because F is sort of a little bit in the middle of those two B flats, right? There are sometimes B flat alto, which means you have to go up, which means it's really terrifyingly high. So you have to go up a fourth. And then you also have to go down a fifth, sometimes B flat basso, which is the happier transposition because it's a little safer, a little lower. Probably the worst transposition is B natural, because it's down a tritone, which is really just, you just have to memorize it. I mean, because it's usually like, I think I've seen it in operas and I've seen it in Brahms symphonies, but you just have to memorize it, or you write it in.
This is my takeaway from here. First of all, you have an instrument where you really have to be paying attention to your mouth.
Yes.
And you really have to be paying attention to your ears. And then you also have to be thinking crossword puzzles at the same time. So you have to be really smart too.
It does, yes, horn playing does require a certain level of cerebral fortitude. That is for sure.
That the other instruments don't necessarily have. I know clarinets have to think about it a little, trumpets have to think about it a little, but not to the same extent.
That is true. There are other I want to just make sure there are other challenges in other instruments.
Oh, sure. We'll
so like,
like I wouldn't want to be an oboe player just because they're so lonely. I mean, let's see.
Well, also, we don't get as many notes as violinists and oboes and clarinetists have. So I am often grateful. I'd rather think more and play fewer notes. So it's a good one for me.
Is that because why do they have you play less? Is it because they don't want to tire the orchestra or the audience?
I think it is. I think it's also just the instrument in general, especially because you couldn't play as rapidly. I mean, when you had to play on the natural horn, the way you would get the different chromatics within a certain overtone series when you stick the crook in is by moving your hand. I can see if I can try this to show you what you'd have to do. Can you see this okay?
I can, yeah.
Okay. So this would be a C major scale, and I hope I don't mess this up, but I'm going to try. I am by no means a master of natural horn, but
You
that
did that all with the hand in the bell.
all with the hand.
You didn't push any buttons at all?
No keys at all. No.
That's amazing.
Well, thank you. But no, but because that's the mechanics by which you had to play a more melodic line, like not just the timpani lines, which are, I mean, a lot of our Mozart symphony parts are like that, like all, over and over again. Like we're basically doubling the timpani. Occasionally we have a little melodic line, but not a lot.
Because he was writing before there was a whole lot of horn action going on.
This is true. I mean, in fairness, Mozart did really push the boundaries of the horn with his horn concertos.
Yes.
Because he was writing for a friend of his, Leutgeb, I think his name was, and he actually owned a cheese factory, and he would write stuff in the scores like, "Oh, you idiot, I can't wait to hear, you mess this part up." I mean, it's hilarious. It's actually, like, there's a lot of really good things. I'll send you another link that's actually really funny about Mozart. You can include it in the show notes. But
is it
but
easy
yeah,
to play the horn then? Is it like an easy instrument to mess up?
Oh, totally. Yeah. So here's the thing. So the way that every fingering or overtone series on our horn works, it's kind of like a ladder, right? So like, here's just the open F overtone on the horn. So that's the fundamental. Now, all of the partials that arise from that are still the same openness, right? Now notice, as I went higher, the rungs, the notes started getting closer and closer together, right? Mm-hmm. So what's really interesting about that, this is the way I describe it, is that every overtone series is like a ladder, right? And at the very bottom of the ladder, the sides of the ladder are nice and wide. The rungs are really huge. It's really easy to just drive your note right in. Another way of thinking of it is the note shelf. When you're in the low range, when you're in the bottom parts of the overtone series, it's like parking an airplane in a hangar. It's just really nice and easy. Just stick it in there. As you go higher, picture that ladder becoming more and more narrow, and the rungs are like right next to each other. So it's super easy to miss the notes up there because they're so close together.
Wow.
And so the great thing is that we have all of these different combinations of horn lengths that we can access by pushing the different combinations of fingerings. So I can decide, like, I can get a note, I can get this note. That's a G, that's the G at the top of the G clef staff for me. Now I can physically get that note without this trigger, right? But it's a lot higher on that partial because the horn is actually longer when I don't push this trigger. When I push this trigger, it shortens the horn. It goes into, there's
it easier for you to play the note.
Totally. And in fact, there's...
Play the note with
okay, so here's the open one. Doesn't sound the same. Right. It sounds the same, but it feels different to me.
Yeah, that's important to know. I would never know that.
Yes. These are all these different things that we have to keep in mind. And there are certain times when I do prefer a really obvious place where it's very obvious is in the middle range, because it sounds so lovely when you can actually make the horn a little longer. So if I went, I can play that on the B flat horn, but listen to the difference. So here's the longer. Here's the shorter. So there's a little bit of a timbral difference. It's like a little bit more woodwindy. Now, sometimes that's good. Like if you're playing in a woodwind quintet and you want to blend a little bit better and sort of adjust your timbre, that's a fantastic way to do it. You can do that too. If you need to play something really fast, like for instance, the second horn part to Beethoven's Third Symphony, in the trio, That little much easier if you use the shorter fingerings to kind of crank those notes out, because you're chopping up the airstream with these valves and rerouting the air. And so when you're playing faster notes, it's really helpful if you can use a shorter tubing to reroute that air through. It just makes the response a lot easier.
Okay, well, let me bring this down to folks that probably only play the piano. Or guitar people will probably understand this better than the piano people.
Okay.
Piano, you just got to plan out where your hand is going to go, because wherever you put your hand, that's the note. But you're saying you almost got to be strategic. Like you almost there may be 5 gas stations out there, and you need to decide which gas station is going to be the best gas station for the route you're taking. Right?
Absolutely. That's a great analogy.
Go to the other gas station, but there may be some stuff in the road over there, and this part is real easy. Guitar players have this too, though. They have to think about, not to the same extent as you, but they have choices with their frets, and they can decide which, what's going to be the easiest path for my hand to go, that kind of thing.
That's such a great analogy. I love that. Absolutely. There are a lot of different considerations, and it's going to vary from player to player. It's going to vary from horn to horn. Different horn models may.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, because it depends. Like every horn, it's just like any other instrument. Like every instrument's going to have its quirks. Like this horn has one note on it that's a little quirky, and I have to be really careful. I have 3 different fingerings that I use for it, depending on what I need, right? Like one fingering's a little low, but sometimes maybe I need it to be a little low. Another fingering is really, really a little on the high side, and sometimes that's good. It just depends on what part of the chord I'm in. It depends on how quickly I need that note to respond, and how like if it's tricky, like if it's a delicate entrance, I'll probably use the shorter fingering, even though it might be a little flat. So I mean, we're getting into the weeds here a little bit.
Well, let me get this straight. So not only do you have to be really good at playing your instrument, not only do you have to be to be thinking a lot, but it could depend, like you have to think even more depending on what instrument you have. You have to think even more depending on what day it is and who you're playing with. That sounds just maddeningly complicated. How do you do that? Who can do that?
To be fair, I think a lot of any instrumentalist is gonna have to learn their instrument, right? So oboe players, oh my gosh, we had an oboe audition here in January, which is maybe not the greatest idea, but it was when we could have it. And like 5 oboes cracked because it was ridiculously cold. I mean, it gets really, really cold in Wisconsin because we're in the upper Midwestern tundra. And
the instruments got cracks in them.
Oh yeah, they cracked. Wow. They had like 5 people crack their oboes, and then of course to say nothing of reeds. Yeah, so I mean, like oboe players are constantly. I mean, at least my lips are built into my face, and they don't really change that much. It's like I'm not like having to
Well, as long as you don't injure them.
What?
As long as you don't injure them.
As long as you don't injure them. That is also another thing. This is why the embouchure is important, though, because. And I address this a lot in my lessons, that you have to make sure that you keep a good cushion, right? Because if you don't, like if you're pulling your lips too thin, that's a recipe for injury, because you're diluting your cushion, right? Your cushion's not, going to be able to resist the pressure that you need, especially in the high range. So so those are great questions. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, we've talked a lot about specifics of the horn, and I think if folks have any more questions, we'll find a way for them to ask you through me, and we'll do that.
Absolutely.
But let's just back out a little bit, talking about the horn, and the other instruments. Horns, to most people, they just look like, they look like trumpets. Some people wouldn't even know that a horn wasn't a trumpet. But I happen to know that horns also get to hang out with instruments that don't look anything like them, the woodwind instruments, the oboe and the bassoon. How is that you don't really hear trumpets hanging out with oboes and clarinets nearly as much as you hear horns hanging out with clarinets and oboes?
That is such a great question. I always laugh because we get to play in both brass quintets and woodwind quintets. And that's because we were the first wind instrument. We were the first brass instrument to be added to the orchestra along with the oboe, which is really neat. So I joke that we're bisectional because we have to be able to go back and forth. We have to be able to be versatile that way, because we have to be able to play the really, really delicate and more transparent, more French almost sounding music, more impressionistic kind of sounds of the woodwinds. But then we also have to really have that more really more opaque kind of brass sound to play with the brass instruments. So yeah, it's a really fun dichotomy, and that's also why we are also the most vulnerable to injury, because we are the brass instruments that are playing the most in most orchestral repertoire because of that, because we are a color that is used not only in the woodwind heavy sections, but also in the brass heavy sections. Well, so yeah.
If you're playing more than the other brass, what do horn players do to make sure that they can take care of themselves?
Very good question. The principal horn player in every section can get an assistant. And we have a fifth horn player on our roster that is specifically for that purpose, to give the principal horn relief. They're the associate principal horn. So they, in any given program, you have like the appetizer piece, which is usually like an overture or a short piece. Then you have like the salad course, right, which is the concerto, usually. And then there's intermission, and then there's the main entree, right? So, which is the symphony. So the associate principal horn usually plays, they could actually play principal on either or both, depending on the repertoire, the appetizer piece or the salad piece. And then during the main chorus, they will assist the principal horn.
Okay, so we're getting into...
that kind of helps with that, yeah.
So now we're moving into the job of a horn player, and we're talking about how, ideally in a symphony, you want to have enough people to make sure that nobody has to work too hard, which
absolutely
wish we had in education. That would be great, but at least it's happening in a symphony.
Right.
So let's talk about the
in
job.
Some symphonies, yeah.
Let's talk about I understand, right? Of course, not every symphony. Some horn players just have to
tough it out,
I guess. So talk about the job of, you're in a position, I don't know if people realize how rare it is to be able to, you play for the Milwaukee Symphony, your third horn, is that correct? Third horn?
Third horn, yes.
Okay. And that's a very, I don't want to call it lucky because you've worked so hard to get there, but in the end of the day, I'm sure you feel lucky to be working in that position. And
yeah, I definitely feel very fortunate. I think the odds of winning an orchestral full-time orchestral job are like somewhere around the same odds of getting into the NBA.
Yeah.
So.
Is it, do you think, I was just going to say, like, a lot of people probably know, at least, getting into the Major League Baseball, a Major League Baseball team, that's the show, and you've made it. Is it being in a symphony orchestra like that, getting into the show?
It really feels that way. It's so funny. I remember when I was at Oberlin, we were watching the Olympics. I think in 1988, I was a freshman, and I said, boy, I wish there was an Olympics for music. And someone said, there is. It's called the real world. And, and I love that. And
did you get medals for that? I've never gotten a medal for that.
I know. Well, medal is the job, I guess. But
right.
But no, right. So yeah, absolutely. It is really difficult. And there are plenty of really great players who just never do have the planetary lineup and all of the variables that you need to be able to walk in there and convince them that out of however many people showed up for the audition, you are the one person that they want to hire. And I think there were 88 people that showed up for my audition, but that's actually low. For most auditions, usually there's like 100, or if it's a string position, there are even more. I mean,
now that doesn't sound very high, but we have to remind people that that's 100 people who basically spent 20 years getting ready to audition out of the thousands or tens of thousands of people who studied the horn. So it's kind of like, you're not even going to be invited to audition unless you have certain qualifications, right?
That is true. Although I think, unless you have like a certain level of experience, the education certainly does help you get that experience, because it trains you to be able to get jobs. But that's not the only one. Like, you could go to Juilliard and be amazing, but if you can't show up and audition well, you're not going to get a job.
Right.
So so there's lots of other variables. Yeah.
So what we're saying is that for a job like yours, 100 of the best horn players in the world might show up to audition for that job. That's what we're really saying.
That is true. That is true.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and it is usually international. It can be international, but it's mainly people who, I mean, because every person that's auditioning has to pay their own way.
Mm-hmm.
They have to, you know, buy their plane ticket. They have to get off work. That's another thing. So you not only have to shell out the money for the audition, for the travel and board and food and everything, you might have to give up work. So that's another thing that's another variable that's really tricky. So
yeah. Well, okay. So you're in a symphony orchestra. What's it like? I mean, what's the year like? What's the day like?
Well, a typical season, we have between 16 and 18 subscription concerts. So that's a week where we have about 4 or 5 rehearsals, ranging from 2 hours to 2.5 hours each. And then we give 2 to 3, depending on the week, performances of that repertoire. And again, the subscription concerts are more typical. They're the more, you know, what we were talking about, the appetizer and salad and then intermission and then main course piece. So those are the subscription concerts. That's where you're going to find a lot of your traditional symphonic repertoire, like Tchaikovsky symphonies and Mozart and Brahms and Strauss and Mahler and Bruckner and things like that. So those are the subscription concerts. Then we have our Pops series. So we have like, usually artists that come and they do, like we played with a mariachi group that came. We've had certain shows that come through. They have their own arrangements and they present like music from the 60s, you know, the Jersey Boys or something, you know, like that kind of thing. Sometimes we have Broadway musicals. We have sometimes like the traditional songbook, like lots of Gilbert and Sullivan or Rodgers and Hammerstein type things. My favorite recent Pops series, these are usually specials, is when we perform the entire soundtrack to a movie like Star Wars or Harry Potter or Jurassic Park or Indiana Jones while the movie shows above us on the big screen.
And it is take the orchestra out of that film that they give you, so yeah. You're not just doubling, you're not lip syncing, you're you're the music for that.
We are the soundtrack, yes. And it's so cool, it's so neat. And so the conductor often has a click track that they wear. Sometimes we have to wear a click track too. It depends on the difficulty. The most difficult film score I have ever played is for the movie West Side Story. It was everybody had to wear a click track, and it was so fast because we're so used to playing the music from West Side Story separately when we don't have to sync it with the movie. And at that point, we can sort of take it at a comfortable tempo, right? But this is very different to play it with the
step on the moving bus. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So that was the hardest one. The second hardest one I've ever played by far was Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark. Yeah. Huh. That was insane. Like the music for the giant rolling ball. And I think there was another one that was like the action scenes. Man, I'm telling you, like, I mean, young John Williams, boy, I'll tell you, it's vigorous stuff. But it was fun. Like, it's really fun. It's kind of like an adrenaline rush to play that stuff because it is really hard. And you only have one shot at it, you know? Yeah. So it's really, really fun. I love playing film scores. But it's also interesting to perform them because they were never intended to be performed like that. That's right. Because like what you would do is you'd show up and all you would do for one day is you'd record the action scene, then you go home. And you have a whole new lip the next day that you show up for the end credits or whatever, you know.
10 tries for the big rolling ball. You wouldn't have
Right. Oh yeah. You can rehearse it, and then as soon as you got it really good, then you can play it. But like this is very different. Like, and the other thing that's usually really challenging about playing film scores is the film itself is challenging. The hardest music of the whole film is in the end credits because it's also long. Yeah. Because it's like you have to run all the credits.
Oh gosh, right. You've been playing the 2 hours, and now you got to play a 5-minute credit thing.
And it's usually
highlights from the movie.
Right, exactly. And it's very fun, but that's usually where the orchestra is really showcased too, because it's just us, right? We're the main thing happening in the end credits. And so that's really fun because people will stay and listen to us and then applaud us at the end. It's just really cool. I adore playing film scores. So that's part of we've been doing more and more films lately because people love them. So because it's just so much fun to go see these old nostalgic movies. Like we did E.T., we did I think we did what was another one we did that was neat? Casablanca. That was really fun.
Wow.
Yeah, so the really neat old movies, and they're just so fun. And then, you get to sit in a theater and have the collective experience of watching these great movies on the big screen with live music. Like that's an unusual experience, it's really, really fun. So,
well, what's your day like?
It depends on the week, because depending on the repertoire. So usually, like on Tuesday, we'll have usually one rehearsal. We might also have like a couple of young people's concerts. That's another thing that sometimes happens. Wednesday is usually a double rehearsal. So we rehearse from 10 to 12:30 and then from 2 to 4. And then Thursdays also can be a double day. And then on Friday, we'll have a dress rehearsal in the morning, because we have sometimes 5, depending on the repertoire. If it's a really difficult, like Mahler symphony that's really long, we could have up to 6 rehearsals. That's rarer though. It's usually 5. And then we have a Friday night performance, a Saturday night performance, and sometimes, depending on the repertoire and how popular they think it's going to be, how well it's going to sell, we'll also have a Sunday afternoon performance. So our really only guaranteed day off in the week is Monday. So yeah, so I will usually get up. It depends on if it's my husband and I take turns getting up with the kids in the morning. I usually take Monday, Wednesday, Friday of getting up at 6:30 with my kids to get them out the door. They catch the bus at about 7:20. And then I have breakfast. I drink my tea, and while I'm warming up, I like to warm up at home, because I feel like just getting everything going and warming it up before I go to work, like having an interval between my first notes of the day and when I actually have to go to work, it really helps. It helps me feel like more warmed up and more loose, and like things are circulating a little better. So yeah, that's what I normally do. I go to work. I have a good morning rehearsal. I have a travel mug of tea that I drink during the rehearsal, kind of keep me going. At break, I will usually I'll either eat a lunch I brought for myself, or I'll go somewhere. There's a lot of restaurants within walking distance of the hall. And maybe walk over to Starbucks. There's a Starbucks right close to the hall. Now, we're actually moving to a new hall, so I'll have to find out where else to eat and get my coffee, but I'm sure that'll be fine. But no, yeah, it's really exciting. So, and then we have the afternoon rehearsal. And then I go home, and see my kiddos, and sometimes teach. I teach on Thursday and Friday afternoons, and I really, really, really love teaching. It's like so much fun for me. I love being able to show people what they don't know that they can do yet. Like, that's exciting for me. I love that. I really, really do. I love the excitement that someone gets on, when they learn that they can do something that they didn't think they could do. So that's really exciting to me. So teaching is a really important part of my life as a musician, because I feel like it actually feeds me as a musician, as a performer, because all of the cheerleading I do to encourage and give pep talks to my students, those are all things I need to be hearing too, right? I need to be hearing those pep talks. I need to be feeling okay about my mistakes and reframing them as information. That's all it is. A mistake is only a loss if you don't get the information that it's holding for you, right? So if let's say I'm playing Star Wars, right? And I mess up, right? Right? So I could be like, oh no, I missed that note. I'm such a loser. Oh, right? I could go to a very bad place, right? I could. Now that's a choice, right? This is a choice of mindset that I have to make every single time I play my horn. And I choose for my own sanity, and also just to make sure that my mindset stays strong, because that is such an important part of playing an instrument, as you know. I choose to say, okay, so I missed a note. I'm human. I'm not an automaton, right? I am fallible. We're all fallible. That's okay. Now, what am I going to get out of this mistake? How am I going to learn more about that note that I missed by how I missed it? Now, how did I miss it? How did you miss that note? Like, I overshot it, right? So I overshot it. So guess what? I could say, that note is not as high as I thought it was. So now I can go back and I can say, gee, I wonder if I aim a little lower. Let's see. Voila, right? I mean, now I'm like, awesome. Now, if I hadn't gotten that information from that mistake, then I would be no better off. But that's how we can choose to really just sort of like, what is the wisdom? What is the fruit that that mistake is offering us? You know, we can really grab that. It's really, that's the kind of reframing I try to encourage my students to do. Like, here's another example. If I have a really tricky solo or something, and it's been going well all week, I will start to get a little nervous, right?
Right.
Because I'm like, gosh, am I going to remember to do everything well? So I actually, and this might be a little superstitious too, but it's actually a relief to me if I miss it in the dress rehearsal, because that is an opportunity for me to be reminded of what I need to do to play that successfully. And I'm grateful for that. And that's the thing. We just have to be grateful, because we also want to make sure that we're not playing in a fearful manner. I don't want to play like that. I want to be joyful when I play. I've worked too hard and put too much into this whole process for me to not enjoy it at this point, right? I want to enjoy it. And the best way to enjoy it is by having fun and by not being perfectionist about it, you know? And ironically, when I am having fun, when I'm relaxed, when I'm energized by the process, the creative process of playing, that's when I play my best. And that's sort of, it's a virtuous cycle in the same way that negative thoughts is a vicious cycle, right? So
Yeah.
It's just a matter of spinning the wheel the other way.
Did you come to these this is wonderful what you're talking about. Did you come to these ideas through lessons you learned in your life, or are you able to take these lessons into your life, or is it kind of all the same?
I read this really powerful book that started me on the path of positive thinking. Now, it's not just everything is great, everything is awesome, you know, people like me and I feel good about it's not that. That's not what positive thinking is. This book, Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz, he's a scientist. I think he was a plastic surgeon, and he started to notice differences in how his patients reacted to their surgery. Like, some patients would think that if they got that nose job, it would miraculously change their life. And in some cases it would. And he, as the surgeon, knew that it wasn't the nose, but it was the mindset, right? And some people wouldn't, you know? And so it got him really interested in just how our mind is so powerful, and how our outlook and how the way we think about things really, really can make a difference. So that really changed me. The reason I started reading it is because of performance anxiety, because a teacher recommended it for me, that I read it for helping with my stage fright and the fact that I was working so hard, and I wasn't at that point able to really enjoy the fruits of my labors in a performance. And it really made me angry. I was like, why am I doing this? I know I can play this. What is happening here? And so just kind of getting into the mind and like how the mind works. And one of the things I learned when I read this book, which was so powerful, it kind of made me think I could just dump out my brain and like look at everything that was in it and only put back the things I wanted, which was cool. One of the things I learned was that the brain does not process negative commands well. It just doesn't. Like, this is why it only hears the verb, right? This is why if you've ever been playing and thinking, don't mess that up, don't mess up, don't mess up, all your brain hears is mess up, and you're much more likely to mess it up, right? So that was huge for me. So instead of being worried about messing up, I would start filling my brain with things that I could do to be successful. Like, breathe, say this syllable, this is where my tongue is, sing, what is the note that I'm hearing? Can I sing this note? That's another thing that really helps me kind of get out of my head, is to just really think about, I love to sing. I'm not a professional singer, But singing really helps. Like if I'm working on a really difficult passage in my practicing, and it's just the technique is really getting to me, if I stop, put the horn down, and just sing it, it really helps me so much just to kind of go back into what is the music, what's the essence of this outside of all the technical stuff. So to get back to your question about mindset and positive thinking, a lot of it has just been what works. You know, what was able, I did not get successful performance by thinking negative thoughts. You can't build on something that you can't do. And if you're constantly beating yourself up, not only is that not going to be constructive, you're not going to want to do it, right? We are not creatures that voluntarily suffer and inflict suffering on ourselves. We're going to avoid those situations if they're unpleasant, if they're feeling abusive, and we can be abusive to ourselves for sure, right? So it's my approach and my mindset to just not do that. to just be like, okay, I have chosen to play the horn. This is what I want to do with my life. How am I going to do that? And what are the things I have to do to accomplish that? And have fun. Like that's a big part of my process. I have to be having a good time, at least to some degree, right? I have to find something that I enjoy about playing it to help energize me, to help focus me, to help relax me. All of those things are so crucial. And then finding a really constructive process for you to look at these things. And I know it's hard because, you know, as musicians, we're constantly evaluating, because when we practice, what is practicing? We play it, we evaluate what needs to be fixed, and then we fix it, right? It can be really easy to go just totally down a negative road. So I always try to find something I liked about the way I played it. That's the first thing. Also in my lessons, totally the same thing. Like when people play something for me, even if they have a lot of trouble, right? Wow, there's always something that you can find that you liked. That's the first thing you start with. You build on that, right? If you just focus on what's broken, you can't rebuild anything, right? You have to start with what is good and then just kind of move with that, just kind of build on that. And that to me is a more satisfying process. It's a process that gets me excited. And it's a process that leaves me excited to come back to practice the next day after I'm done. That's the way you want to feel. You want to feel good about it. And this is a hard process because it does apply, like you said, it does apply to all the other aspects of your life, right? Being positive with yourself, being constructive with yourself. It's more than just affirmations. It's how you tell your brain to act and how you're speaking to yourself. What's your self-talk? You know, like what do you say to yourself when you make a mistake? What is that internal dialogue? You know, it's hard. It was hard for me to get to that place because it's a very exacting profession to perform for a living, right? It is. And it is, we have to have high batting averages, right? We have to have high accuracy. But how are you going to achieve that? Are you going to achieve that through fear? Are you going to achieve that through self-abuse? No, I don't want to achieve it that way. Some people might, but this is just not the way I approach things.
So now you're not only playing for yourself, you are an active member of a community. This orchestra that you're in is a community, and that community has its own challenges. It makes its own mistakes, and you're a part of that community, and you have to be a part of its movement. Have you been able to apply this hard-earned mindset to the challenges that are facing symphony orchestras today, where there are fewer of them, where the audience may be not listening like they used to, where the survival, I mean, forget about the virus. Even before the virus, the survival of symphony orchestras was in peril. Have you been able to use this mindset to improve that?
That's such a great question. It's a big question. I love it. Yes, I think that we need to be proactive. And I think that's part of what the challenge is as members of an arts organization that is essentially recreating a lot of old traditions and old art creations, right? So it can be difficult for those organizations when you're steeped in that history to evolve to what the more modern culture is. I think that we need to be better at looking at what we do offer as symphony orchestras, right? For so long, it was sort of like the tradition, the older tradition, the historical tradition of symphony orchestras is that it was very, very much you would go to the symphony because it was good for you, and you would sit there and you would listen and you would be a better person because of it, and you wouldn't question anything, and then you would go home, right? And it was also very, yeah, right? I mean, it really was like that, right? It was very, very sort of, very, what's the word?
It was very eat your vegetables, really.
Yeah, eat your vegetables, or yeah, like very like.
But
like,
I mean, there were some people that I think loved it, really
Yeah.
loved it. And then there may have been other people that were just there to be seen or because they were
Yes.
told it was good for them.
Exactly. Monolithic is the word I was looking for. So like, It's
Sure.
just sort of like, this is supposed to be like that. But now it's really interesting, especially in light of the current events. It's like, how can we become more relevant and more the symphony for all of the communities in Milwaukee, or all of the communities? Like, who are we not reaching? Who does not feel necessarily welcome in our hall? I mean, we're moving into a new hall. And so these are questions that we're asking. I'm one of two musicians that's on our EDI task force. So EDI is Equality, Diversity, and Inclusion. And this was back in March that we formed this committee, and we also had members of our board and members of the staff. And we wanted to hire a consultant to come in and do an internal audit for our organization to see how are we not reaching? What do we look like as an organization? Like, in what areas can we still improve and make ourselves more relevant? I think that is a huge part of how orchestras can remain relevant in this age of everybody has entertainment at their fingertips, literally. Everybody can stream this and see this. What is it that we're offering? How do we make this a more personal experience? I think that's one of the reasons why movies are so powerful and so popular, is because it allows people to come together. They know that they're going to enjoy the show because they know it, they're familiar with it. And it's a shared experience. That's what we miss when we don't go attend a live performance. It's a shared experience. You get to hear the live music. It's fantastic. What's really fun is a lot of our conductors of these movie scores encourage the audiences to cheer for their favorite heroes and boo their favorite villains and just clap whenever they wanted to. I mean, it's so much fun. I mean, it's a really wonderful experience for everybody in the space that's experiencing it. So I do think that that's a way in which I'm not quite sure how I connect the dots between my own mindset and what I just said about how I envision the symphony orchestra in the future. But I think that's part of it. I think it's less old school. I mean, we have to start thinking in a new way. We have to start thinking in a more positive way. Like, instead of bemoaning, like, oh, we're not selling as many recordings, and yes, that's a valid point, and like, oh, people aren't coming to see this, and oh, blah blah blah, and I don't know if that's necessarily a helpful way of thinking about it. Why not? Let's look at why. How has society changed in the last 20 years? Are those changes all bad? I don't think so. I think it's great that we're being asked to step up and become even more engaged and to sort of erode this barrier between the orchestra and the audience, and the orchestra and its community. I love that. I think that's exciting. We've done sort of like what I call outside the box performances like that. I consider movies to be sort of outside the box. We do rock concerts. We have tribute bands that'll do like Led Zeppelin and Michael Jackson and Queen, and they're so much fun. And people come to those concerts that would not necessarily come hear us play Mahler, right? And that's fine. That's great. It's reaching as many people as possible. We have to expand our menu. right? It's like when you go to a restaurant and all they have is meat and you're a vegetarian. Like, we can't do that anymore. We have to make sure that we are serving everyone. We have to have a wide variety of choices for people. One of the most brilliant things that we did, I think, is we used to do these kinder concerts, right? That's how we marketed them. And they were at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, which is right in the middle of nap time. Not a good time to bring a kindergarten or preschool aged kid. And so what we did is we started having, we scratched those because they weren't selling well. And we made them family concerts, right? And we expanded the programming so it was accessible and enjoyable for everyone, no matter what the age. And we started seeing sold out performances, vans with 3 generations of people coming to those concerts. And that's an example of how can we better serve our communities? The answer is that's the question we need to be asking, not bemoaning the fact that the orchestras of yore are gone. Well, guess what? Like, there are more people of color and women in orchestras now than there used to be. I think that's good, right? Orchestras have changed, society has changed, and we need to evolve.
So what I hear you saying, to connect to what you were saying before, is there's a mindset which says that if something's not working in the orchestra, if the orchestra is seeming to be making mistakes, it can either, like one attitude is, oh, these are mistakes. Oh, I'm so unhappy about these mistakes. I'm so unhappy that we're not doing well. I'd rather just get away from this. And you're saying these mistakes are opportunities to learn and grow. We can take, if people aren't coming, we say, well, thank you for not coming. So now that I know this isn't working.
Precisely. We have to look at the data. There's so much information, but if we're too consumed in shame and self-pity about the fact that what we're doing isn't working, then that's not going to get us anywhere. We're not going to be able to see the data. We're not going to be able to evaluate the data and say, oh, wow, so this is where we need to be putting our energy. This is what has sold more tickets in the past. How can we combine these elements to energize our community to come see us? How can we be more reaching out and welcoming to different parts of our community? We still don't know a lot of that. We still don't know. I mean, that's part of the reason why we hired a consultant to do that internal audit of our community, of our organization. Like, not only of the people that we hire, right? But where do we hold chorus auditions? Are we reaching out to minority communities and including them in this artistic tradition of our city? Are we looking to include more women in our staff? Are we looking to hire more Black people in our staff? You know, like what is our process lacking? But also, where are our opportunities for growth? For sure.
And thank you so much for talking with us about all these subjects about the horn. This was really great.
It's so good to see you, and it's wonderful to talk to you. And I love what you're doing. Your organization sounds phenomenal. And as a lifelong, a long time friend of Adam, I've been friends with him for over half of my life. And I am honored to call him my close friend from college. And anyone who has the opportunity to study with Adam, or anyone that he deems fit to serve in his committee, in his organization, is incredibly fortunate. So
thank you so much for that advertisement. I appreciate it.
You are so welcome. It's very heartfelt and very true. So
thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks very much also for you folks tuning in with us today. We really appreciate you hanging out with us and learning. We do have more interviews coming. We're going to be having our second interview with Steve Espinola coming up very soon. And we've got other musicians that I haven't even begun to mention. I can't wait to introduce you to them. Thank you all very much. And this is Adam Cole with Grant Park Academy of the Arts, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.
Thank you.